All right, welcome to the Catalyst Circle meeting. We'll start with a quick check-in. So this is just a time to let everybody know where you're at, how you're feeling, and your mental state, I guess. And we'll start with Joey and then go to Felix.
Hi, Nori, welcome back. You were missed. Glad you had a great vacation. I'm doing good. Hot here in Philly, over 100 degrees today. So looking forward to the meeting. I'm staying in the cool.
All right, Felix, and then Tommy.
Pretty much same here. Really nice to see you back, Nori. Awesome. Hope you had a nice time. And yeah, still passing through a little bit of flu. It's not COVID, but some other shitty flu. So feeling like shit from time to time, but happy to be here and happy to whatever might happen.
Thanks, Felix. Tommy, and then Steve.
Can you now hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm good. I've been quite busy doing all the BPA stuff, but yeah, still alive.
All right, Steve, and then Quasar.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's been an interesting week of conversations. Our group is kind of waiting on me for an idea I've had, but I'm not quite sure how to go for it. But I don't know if you want to talk about our particular group, but I'm great.
Awesome. Harris, and then Reese.
Yeah, I'm definitely doing well. I think I finally adjusted to this time zone. I've been doing a lot of travel. Went to Mongolia and some other places and had a chance to engage community members, and it was definitely a worthwhile trip, but back on this time zone, I think now here in California, but glad to be here with all of you.
Awesome, thanks, Harris. Reese, and then Quasar.
We skipped Quasar, did we? Cat. Yeah, I'm good. Nothing really to complain about, guys. Typical normal Reese over here. Danny's just gone away for a holiday, so it means I can work long hours without getting in trouble. So things are good.
Nice. Quasar, then JP. Can you, you can't unmute? Oh, hold on.
Oh, it's because Quasar was made co-host, not Yonder.
Yeah.
Because you came in with a different account.
Yeah, I apologize. I had to switch from a phone over to here to be on time. So everything's great. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you all. It's nice to see you. Looking forward to this meeting.
Awesome.
Yeah. Same here. Doing good. Looking forward to it. I'll be away for the next meeting, so excited for here. But going to be at a couple cabins, so definitely need to get out, get some vacation. So
nice. And for myself, it's good to be back. It was nice to have the month of July off and had some really great adventures with the family. But I'm really excited to dive back in and be with you all. I missed the community and missed all of your awesomeness. So yeah, really good to be back. Let's dig into the agenda. We have a short section here for any announcements. Does anybody have anything they want to announce? These are things that are coming up or things that you think people should be aware of. Anything that you want to announce? Tommy, go ahead.
Yeah, having gone through this VPA stage now, it really feels like we need another process because it's become very stressful and full of malicious actors, and we need to do something about it soon. And I'm not quite sure what the IOG plan regarding that is, so it would be nice to hear.
Perhaps we can add that as an agenda item, as just a topic to bring up and discuss. Yeah. Okay. Any other announcements? All right. So the next is the agenda. Let me share my screen actually, so we can get the agenda up. All right, can everybody see my agenda screen?
Yeah.
All right. So the main agenda section doesn't have a whole lot in here except for the voting process and timeline. But there are some notes here from Quasar at the end. So I just want to know how we want to merge those in.
Yeah, I would like to add an item for the code of conduct.
Quasar, did you want to make the second version of the Pol.is?
Yes, I'll be putting together another wiki survey from Pol.is.
And should we talk about that? Like, what is the objective of the second version?
Well, with the the first version, recently I went through it. There was a lot of questions that or statements that had conflicting answers or indications. So when we went back through it, by separating the statements and making them more narrow, it'll give us a better opportunity to identify with a little more integrity in the data what people are thinking.
Okay, so we can recast and reposition the statements, but they're going to create new ones anyway, right? In a Pol.is file?
Well, I've been doing a little bit of research on Pol.is. I like what they do. I believe you can limit it where people can't add additional statements. However, I think we do want people adding new statements. We want that feedback. So, I believe that there's value in offering one that's locked, not allowing statements, and then one that offers up, community conversation and feedback. And narrowing the scope of the poll of the surveys will also provide more clarity in the intent or the data that we're really looking to capture.
Okay, if we can add that as an agenda item, I think it would be good to talk more on it.
Steve, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Quasar, what I don't want to see in that with that idea of people adding statements is, I can't remember what the context was, that thing. I think it was like the early vote on what people wanted to see on a code of conduct or whatever it was. And it was just, it grew to like 200, 300 statements that people had added, and they were repetitive and they were personal, personal things, and I never did that thing because I don't want to read all that shit, so I don't want to do that to people, when we're being really serious with a Pol.is thing.
Thanks, Steve. We should take the conversation around Pol.is to when we actually bring that topic up. Right now, we are fleshing out the agenda for the meeting today. Any other topics? Quasar, did you want to bring more from this appendix reference notes thing that you have here up into the agenda?
Sure, I believe there's some items there. Harris did bring up the code of conduct, which I've got it listed in here. The meeting time, changing this to a Monday or Tuesday. I don't know if that's a real true agenda, but we need to make a decision on it. Sometime before town hall would be ideal. Then there's, the Circle website, email logo. Thank you for resetting that, Nori or whomever it was. I'll take a look at that. The other items in the notes for me would be defining when we're looking to do the vote for Circle. And timelines, which that's already added there. I believe Joey or Felix added that, so it's part of that. And I believe I'm trying to scroll. I'm trying to scroll on the screen share. Let me go find the document. I'm like, why is this not working? It's one of those days, y'all. So Yeah, just give me a moment.
You need to shake the screen a bit.
I was about to. The rest are questions. I've been informed that challenge teams haven't received any incentive yet from Fund 7. Most of these are kind of questions, really. The other stuff is notes from the working group meeting last week. So I don't know if they really go into the agenda. If you will, would you mind sharing the document that you're working on one more time? I didn't catch it on the last
Yeah.
account.
So, there you go.
Thank you.
All right. So is everybody happy with
I had one other item. So Quasar, in town hall yesterday, you shared the notion of defining the circle competition or composition and function, which I think is paramount to have as we go into a vote. We can't vote without knowing the composition, the seats, how things are organized, what specifics we're going to be voting on. Like, does every seat actually need a general vote? Fun things like that. So, which I believe we were trying to determine from Pol.is. So I thought it was brilliant. You called it out in town hall, and I just think it should be a topic because it's going to help us move forward.
Yeah, that's an important decision to make. And these decisions can be made while we're incorporating or testing voting mechanisms to see that we've got that. I think the voting part's going to be the easiest one. And then the Pol.is, it did indicate, different things on the composition and the function. And now we're in a situation where there's no proposals in Fund 9 for the circle. So there is the issue that is important to the community and everyone about incentives for the circle. There wouldn't be a proposal until Fund 10 for circle, which means we're well into 2023 before there's any type of rewards or an incentive for circle members. So those are the challenging questions, I believe, along with the idea of one wallet versus weighted voting. So
Okay.
And I believe the Pol.is, when we redo those, we can focus on the composition, the groups, where it is, and also the functions as separate items.
So is it okay to talk about the voting process and timeline first, separate from the circle composition and function, and come back to that later? It seems like it'll be a longer topic, or do we want to start with that?
I would like to start with that. That works for me.
I'm not sure how we get to timeline if we don't know what we're voting for.
Well, I just have a quick statement I want to read out that I wrote down, and then we can figure it out from there.
Go ahead, Joey.
All right. I'm just trying to keep the voting process, get it out of the washing machine and get it moving forward. So I wrote down some thoughts. I'm just going to read them out so I don't mumble over my words here. So
this isn't about the agenda. We're still on the agenda creation.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, let's get that done and then we'll come back to this.
No problem.
Composition of the circle and function as our leading topic. How much time do we need for that? Half an hour? Let's start there if nobody else has any suggestions, and then I'll build the agenda off of that. And then at the top of the hour, we get into code of conduct. Pol.is part 2. And then changing the meeting time. Anything else we want to put into the agenda?
I probably don't need 45 minutes there. Just 20 minutes is probably fine.
Are you talking about composition of the circle and function, Joey? The times in the parentheses are the start time, just to help me keep track of when things need to
Oh,
start.
okay.
They're not how long each section is going to be. They're
Okay.
how long into the meeting each section starts. All right, is everybody happy with the agenda as it's written? All right, then let's kick it off. We'll start with the topic of the composition of the circle and its function. And I don't know, do you want to kick us off on that, Quasar, since you brought it up at the town hall yesterday?
I would like to. I'm going to ask Reese if he wouldn't mind doing it. I'm actually on vacation, and my I've got some things going on that I need to attend to just at the very precise moment. So if you will, Reese, if you feel up to it, please do so. If not, come back to me in a few minutes. The composition is really, are these functional roles sufficient as they are? Or do we need more people in each role? There's also the creation of the subcircle, and the Project Catalyst is very much different from Fund 6 when Circle was introduced. We're at Fund 9, almost 10. So that's it. But I'd like to give me a minute to take care of something and then pull up the documents.
Okay.
Cool. I'll
Could
talk
I
for a
just-
second then. Oh, sorry,
I
Steve.
ask
Do you
a
want to dive
question?
in first? Sure.
Well, I just want to ask a question, you know, like when, you know, Quasar is referring to the Pol.is results, and I haven't studied that. I have no idea. What were the results from that poll to indicate what the community wanted to see from a composition, you know, the composition?
Yeah, so I shared it after last week's meeting. I shared it in the chat on Slack. Chris shared his code of conduct, and then immediately after the meeting, and then I shared the digested results of the Pol.is, because they were it ended up being 87 questions and statements that were put in at the end of it. I don't know why, but I can't access my Google Drive, so I can't see it personally, but I do have the original statements that I put in. There were two main things really that seemed to be missing. There were a lot of contradictory statements, so it was hard to, we basically had to very much kind of try and distill it as much as possible. And I laid them all out, and me and Quasar spent about 2 hours categorizing everything. And then I'll try and get a proper link for you guys to share it in the chat. But basically, a lot of the people in the community were saying that there need to be better representation of each role. So not just a single person on each role. The circle should be bigger, was one thing that came up that was quite heavily voted on. And another thing was to have people from all over the world. So we need some representation of the Eastern Hemisphere, or the different town halls, you know, people who are better dispersed across the planet. Both of those I agree with. The funding obviously becomes quite a big issue. Subcircles can kind of step in as part of that role, I guess, but really to have more people rather than 6 or 7 people just kind of sat around talking about stuff, but have more people come in who can take part in this process. So they were the main things, really. I took all the results and I put them into basically little summaries of about 3 or 5 sentences where I just combined all the results of the things in together. And it's really frustrating that I can't access this, by the way, guys, but I do have it. And if you check in Slack, I did share it. So I'll try and find something.
Which channel? Do you remember? Was it general?
In the Catalyst Circle meeting, Catalyst Circle meetings.
Okay.
I believe. Yeah. On the 29th of July, Chris bet put Catalyst Circle Code of Conduct here, and then underneath I put a Google Doc link for the document that I put together, requesting comment and review.
Okay.
Yeah.
I found the link. I just posted that in the chat. And
I can read out the summarized. Oh, cheers, Harris. I can literally access it on my phone and not in on my computer. What bloody pain in the ass. But I can read out these statements anyway. So for we put it into three main categories for the circle, one being roles and functions, one being decision making, and the last one being funding and operational costs. Then there was a couple of miscategories that were either red herring statements completely unrelated, or I put down classic Quasar's political stunts. So all of you guys will understand where I'm coming from with that, even though they weren't technically Quasar's words. But for roles and functions, we got Catalyst Circle should represent functions and categories of work within the ecosystem and should be open to anyone who wants to participate in governance of Catalyst. It should also include at least one member from the Eastern Hemisphere. The Catalyst Circle should be a human sensor array, although that phrasing is intentionally difficult to understand, I think, sometimes, but acting as a representative body for all the different groups participating in Project Catalyst, monitoring the current state and future plans regarding governance and overseeing the strategic direction of Project Catalyst. They should detect and discuss concerns, objections, and opportunities arising within the Catalyst ecosystem and set clear objectives and estimate the time and resources required to deliver on those issues. The Catalyst Circle should record meetings and capture actions in a backlog accessible to all, and reps should be provided with resources, tools, and incentives to collect and make data available to the community. So that's roles and functions. Decision-making and funding are a lot smaller, so just bear with me for a second, guys. Decision-making, Catalyst Circle's decision-making process should work by majority vote, not work through achieving unanimous consent. But the circle is not responsible to deliver on solutions to the problems they've sensed. A little contradictory, but it kind of makes sense. Then funding and operational costs. A meaningful contributing circle should be funded outside of round-to-round funding as DREPs and the like. A certain percentage from each fund's budget should go to maintain and develop the circle operations. Value should not be derived from adding proposals and gaining approval to Catalyst improvement, which I do agree with. Circle reps should have a set budget to create and facilitate working subcircles to solve challenges that are sensed. So they're the main things, summaries. If you scroll down, then in that document, I've got the other statements, and then I have a full list of all of the different Pol.is results adjusted to whether people mostly agreed with them or disagreed with them. So I've adjusted the statements to say not if they were disagreed with mostly, and I've put them into all kind of relevant categories, or kind of categorize them as best as I could, or we could, because it was me and Quasar who did it. But yeah, that's it. It's basically what we've got with. So from that, there are three main things, right? We need to be utilizing the community to solve problems. We're responsible for actually sensing them and coming up with potential solutions to then give back to the community to actually solve. That community mainly focusing on subcircles. So not just saying communities solve these problems, but actually getting a working group together for ourselves, which should be incentivized in some form to help increase participation and actually addressing the problems that we come for in the Catalyst Circle, like within the Catalyst ecosystem. The other thing is people generally seem to think funding should be a part, or like shouldn't be up for vote, because it just creates problems like this, right? Where we're all working for free, and we're at a point where it doesn't seem like there's going to be any funding for the next iteration of the Catalyst Circle, which is how do you expect people to work for that? You know, I'm not expecting you guys to have answers to these things, by the way. And the other thing is we need better representation and potentially more people. That wasn't in the summary, but there were some statements that said that, but have better representation from the planet as a whole, the greater Cardano ecosystem. It's not just the people that we have in here, or necessarily these specific groups, but maybe we should include more groups, so there should be more people participating. In that document, there's a link to the actual Pol.is results, and I think they've just popped up on screen. So yeah, that's basically it from me. I hope I summarized that all right, Quasar. I'm sorry for talking too long.
Thanks, Reese.
Really a lot of great work. Really appreciate the time you guys took to put that together. It's challenging to summarize some of the outcome of Pol.is for sure. Having experience in trying to do that for sure.
I have one summary, and it come from a comment. It was, the circle is neither here nor there.
Which is the one that sparked the Quasar's political statement, the political stunts category, by the way. So there was a lot of stuff in there that was just completely irrelevant, or like, kind of, what is it even doing there, right? There was quite a few of them. But the stuff that actually was relevant or addressed issues that we're actually trying to figure out, they're what kind of formed those final statements, which are all on the Google Doc, and it is a link to this kind of the results of this Pol.is as well.
Another tool that you can use with Pol.is is through all statements, you can sort by percent agreed, disagreed, passed. But group informed consensus seems to be a really good way to float those statements to the top that most people agreed with or have consensus around. And it kind of does them in that order. So like chopping off the top 20 or 50 of these is one way also to slice it and look. And they map very well to what you had discussed in your document. So that's really awesome. Steve, your hand is up.
Yeah, with the idea of the expanding, you know, the number of people in this circle, I was disturbed by Felix's report a couple of weeks ago when he went to Africa Town Hall, and you know, the way I understood him was that they didn't really want to step up and represent, you know, the African community. And in my conversation with Mercy, you know, like there is that element of Africa's so big, right? There's no way somebody from Morocco is represented by Mercy who's from Ghana, let alone people in Ethiopia or stuff, you know, that problem. And yet there is an African community, and they do gather regularly, and they know more about their continental history than most of the rest of us, you know, is the way that I would put it. And I'm prepared to go to the Africa Town Hall tomorrow and really address this issue, because I feel it's fundamentally important. You know, if Africa is part of, you know, Charles's roadmap for the last 6 years, you know, it seems, you know, absurd to me, the idea that this early governance structure we have, that they're not directly represented. And I feel that way, you know, about Latin America and Asia too. You know, I think that, you know, that reticence that Africans may have about, you know, stepping up and speaking for the rest of the Africans in the Cardano community, I think that's less of an issue in, for instance, Latin America, because they share a common understanding of their history for the last couple of hundred years in going towards, you know, moving towards independence and throwing off colonialism as much as they've been able to, you know. And I think that these things have to be considered, you know, like there's hugely different cultural perceptions and understandings, you know, and you know, like we cannot represent any part of the Asian community coming from where we do, you know, because they have fundamentally different cultures, from Japan to Vietnam to, you know, all the rest of the areas. And so it's very important for me and Mercy to see that these different regions in the world that have very strong communities and are making proposals and are building, that they're all represented, you know, appropriately in this stuff. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I agree.
Joey, and then Zoe.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of my subcircle folks, Nebia, who's subcircle for the Africa town halls, he says he wants to step up and run for the role. So there will be someone wanting to represent.
Well, I feel like, you know, if we can make the argument successfully to Africans that they need to do that, you know, like they all seem to like each other, you know, and I think there should be multiples, you know, from each region step up to so that there's an actual election in that group, you know, from that group. And I haven't been able to. It's really difficult for me to hook up with Tron because I'd really like to. I used to speak to her more regularly than I have the last few months, and I intend to reach out and just going to see how all that feels to her. I don't know, Felix, are you still going to Eastern Town Hall?
Yep.
Maybe we can talk about that sometime.
All right, Zoe.
Yeah, thank you. I was lately much thinking and having conversations about those seats, which I feel like the roles are a bit arbitrary, which led to people being elected for to represent a role, and then end up having to reach out to their community. So I think it would be nice to be able to change that dynamic from having a rep who needs to reach out to a community defining a rep by themselves, or like it's an intrinsic decision. And yeah, so the next problem will be how do we then define who can take a seat? And the community notion got brought up a lot, but then that what Steve just said comes in big time. There is not in my mind a possibility to just have all African town hall represented with one seat in circle, or LATAM. And then also what happens is that these communities become relatively detached, not in a way that it's just not that it doesn't have anything to do anymore with capitalism, but more like it becomes its own, or it gets its own dynamic and stuff. So I don't feel like just opposing a new, or just defining a new structure and then, yeah, for me it would be the same if just circle as it now is defines what the next structure of circle will be. Of course it is something you have to do because of the voting, but for me it feels like if we figure out a new structure, it will still not fit because it doesn't it's not this complete bottom up of the reps kind of evolving from by themselves out of the community. And then so I come to my last point. Then the notion, which didn't make it into the Pol.is, sadly, about interest-based seats. So yeah, I just yeet that into the round without much further ado. That interest-based seats, kind of oriented on the funding categories, but not necessarily limited to that. Yeah, thank you for letting me speak.
Thanks, Zoe. Just to summarize what you said for my own clarity and maybe for JP's notes, you were speaking to the idea that perhaps the circle shouldn't define the seats and the roles, because the active definition limits and excludes possibly, and that the seats should be determined by the community, by groups stepping forward and sending representatives. Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Yeah, not saying that this is the right way. It's just the opposite dynamic. It's just, I just try to highlight what the opposite dynamic could look like.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good summary.
Thank you. Harris and then Felix.
Great, thank you. Yeah, appreciate your insight, Zoe. So the purpose of Circle is to help further the process of treasury management, to fairly make decisions to distribute, the funding to the right folks. And so in keeping that frame, how do we manage that? What is the role of the Circle, to do that? What are the mechanisms? I think that's sort of the birth of why we have these functional roles of, PAs and others where, they're focused in particular areas. And I really like the nature of the subcircle model for sure. And, I think it's really helpful to pull in other resources, and, those subcircles can pull in any resources that they want. So I keep kind of going back to the notion of a holocratic type setup. And so if there are elected seats, then we just need to define that short list of here are the seats that we're looking to elect, and potentially we can continue the idea of these subcircles where they can pull in specific parties that would support that and help that. I do think it's reasonable to try to create a catalyst parameter that would allow for a certain amount of funding for each of these groups, and just have that come from Treasury. But that would likely need to be ratified by the community to do that. And so that's something that potentially could be introduced as a question to the community that could be voted on, right? So that could be something we would try to reach out and set up. So, I think this group needs to sort of make a decision, right? We can't spend another 3 months deliberating this. We should experiment and try something, and put it out for the next circle. And so from a structure perspective, if we can't decide on categories versus global location, keeping it functional to keep Catalyst itself running and managing the Catalyst process, that's something that I think should be prioritized. And then we should actually make some decision that says, okay, here's the 10 seats that represent the functional groups to keep Catalyst running. So that's some of my thoughts that maybe help to focus the activities that we have. But again, the goal is let's write down what we think we'd like to see, and then we can run an election through various means.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, I'd
Felix,
just like to
do you wanna-
clarify here.
You had your hand up, but you dropped it.
No, was covered. Go for it, Steve.
So Harris, I'm just kind of trying to extrapolate from what you're saying. You kind of mean that we, particularly after the voting is integrated into the LACE wallet, but even now with Ideascale, we can side load a vote, on particular issues, and that maybe we can go in the direction where what we're actually, this question of governance and treasury and the Circle can be handled outside of the Catalyst funding round process. Because I find that that's really difficult, and I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah, it's possible to run a special voting event specifically. I think that was suggested early on that it probably will not be part of, well, it's not going to be part of Fund 9, but could be somewhere in between or moved into Fund 10. Or if there's a different process to conduct voting, which I know was discussed in the last working group meeting,
Right.
that's independent. It's just a matter of the outreach to the community, getting the most participation, and to get folks involved to make those decisions. But we need to agreement of what's on the ballot.
Right. Yeah. And see, the reason that I'd like to get it out of the funding rounds is because people can name their proposals whatever they want, and people could be voting on something that they think is determining governance, and it's, you know, some yin yang and you know, some place, you know, just running his own DAO experiment for all we know, but he's named the proposal, right? We know that people vote based on names of proposals, and I just, you know, I'd really like governance just taken out of funding rounds. Funding rounds are about growing the ecosystem, and this is about something completely different in my view.
See, Joey.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, trying to represent the whole world, we know is a big challenge. So one of the values I thought would come out of the subcircles that I sent out into the various town halls to represent the circle was also that there's small communities, because most of the other town halls are smaller than the main town hall. But if someone from the subcircle shows up there, they feel connected. They should feel connected back to the larger circle and back to IOG and the whole environment. So even if you can't elect someone from the town hall in Africa or Asia or wherever, if we can send a representative to represent, then that'll help.
Thanks, Joey. Harris.
Yeah, I think I just had a follow-on thought, but yeah, so I think it's going to come down to, you know, we should quickly decide, okay, how many seats, you know, and for each seat, are we going to hold a general election, or are we going to let those communities decide and bring forward a representative that could sit there, and then that determines what's on the ballot, right? These seats and these groups also determine, you know, the how much would need to be paid to run them, so people feel incentivized, right? So we just need to come to some type of determination of what that should be for this next experiment. Ideally do that quickly and move it to ballot.
Thanks, Harris. And I just wanted to bring up a point that you mentioned earlier that hasn't been responded to. You mentioned that the purpose of the circle should be to manage the Catalyst treasury. And that's a big change from its stated like human sensor array to a very specific role of what its ultimate purpose is. Is that something we want to explore a bit? Because I think that can help shape the direction of this conversation as well. Because it kind of narrows the scope down from just sensing whatever issues happen in the community to managing the treasury and the processes that go along to all of that, the PAs, the VPAs, the voting, the funded proposals, all that kind of stuff is a much more narrow scope than I think I'm seeing even through the poll of all sorts of different kinds of things that are tangential to that, but not specifically around treasury management. So I just wanted to bring that up as something to maybe help kind of narrow the focus of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, I can jump in. Just, you know, if we look at innovation, Catalyst is about innovation, and innovation is being developed, you know, in this ecosystem as a result of funds that are available. And, you know, I think it's making good decisions, making the right decisions, ensuring that those decisions aren't, you know, don't have bad actors that are influencing things in the wrong ways. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, it comes down to the distribution of the funds. And that, I think that does help to focus what it is we're attempting. We want to spur conversation. We want to spur, you development in lots of corners of the world. And so far we've been successful in doing that. And this is kind of the continuance of that. So I do think that is sort of framing innovation and treasury management as part of the focus of what Circle will have some say in helping to influence. And it's all part of this process too. It's improving the process, making challenge teams run more effectively, making the PA process better, identifying where those issues are and challenges, and then working towards solving those with, working groups, which is great, which could be formed as a proposal or could be part of a sub-circle. So I do think there's a lot of great ideas here. And I think the notion is we, kick off the election so we can run the experiment.
There's Tommy.
Yeah, it's not the first time I say this, but I'll reiterate. So yes, we should focus on the functions. But what are the functions? What we have identified is that there are functions related to people and culture, to structure and processes, to network and ecosystem, including SPOs, developers. And then on products and services, the whole innovation process and the growth and impact of the whole thing. So if we could finally say that, yeah, something like this are the functions of Catalyst. So let's fill the seats to these. And then it can be interest-based groups, as Zoe said. It can be whoever is interested in, for example, healthcare challenge or whatever, then they can come and represent the products and services seed for a while. But I feel like what Rhys was saying, that there needs to be more than one person. My suggestion has been 2 for the very reason that we could get the sub-circles going, because I feel that the sub-circles and the whole being in the community, it needs to be a person who's very hands-on and sits in the meetings and listens to the community and brings those points of view to the circle, whereas the other representative should be someone who is looking after the longer term strategic development of Catalyst. And it's very hard to find those 2 qualities in the same person. Someone who's very operational and someone who's very strategic, it usually doesn't go hand in hand. So at least two people per seat should be there. And I agree with Harris that we should nail this now. We should say, okay, here is what we are driving towards, and let's start putting the practicalities in place, because we're running out of time again.
Thanks, Tommy. Steve.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said, Tony. But I feel like we should be self-correcting, and if it is an experiment, then it should be easy to just shift and change some stuff. And I can just tell you that from the experience of being on the sub-circle of the funded proposer, nobody talks to us, right? Like they don't have anything to say to us. And I kind of feel like this funded proposer seat on the circle is superfluous, and I don't want to piss off my sub-circle members there, because and I said this yesterday during town hall. I love this group of people. They are exactly the people that I would want to spend my time with. If I'm going to be busy with Catalyst at all, it's with these people. But funded proposers, what? They're busy. They got their money and they're building their stuff, and there's nothing for them to say to us. And so I really want to look at these role names, and not all of them, because stake pool operators, we always need to hear from them. There ought to be always somebody that SPOs can reach out to on the circle. And just think about everybody's who they're repping. The other circle position that I'm curious about is Joey's, you know, with this tool makers and maintainers. I mean, are people reaching out to you that classify as coming from this community? You know, I mean, is this labeled seat on the circle of tool makers and maintainers as well as funded proposers? I'm not seeing that there is an organized community that utilizes this seat on the circle. And if there isn't an organized community or even an informal community that says, hey, let's talk to Mercy because she's a funded proposer rep, or let's talk to Joey because he's the toolmaker maintainer rep, you know, if there aren't people reaching out to circle members, then maybe that seat, you know, under that label needs to be changed, you know, or taken away. But you know, but that's kind of why my emphasis. We know there are regional groups, right? They are busy and they are growing quickly, and that's why I'm focusing on that. And you know, for everybody on my subcircle, I'm not throwing you under the bus on this because I love you guys. I just think, you know, I mean, and we've talked about this in our meetings. You know, it's like we're not getting any feedback. You know, we go to coordinator meetings. We've had a couple of breakout rooms, you know, nobody says anything to us. Nobody has anything for us to work on. We're coming up with our own activities.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Zoe, and then Joey.
Yeah, I also wanted to, or I remembered something. I said I found the seat as they are chosen now super arbitrary, and also because Catalyst, I don't see Catalyst just as, you know, you're either in the Catalyst community or you're not. I see it as something that attracts some people who then decide to work super much in it. But there's also people who are just meant to be catalyzed through it. So I am mentioning this because I feel like we often tend to trying to drag them into the decision-making process when they just want to try to put up a proposal and maybe get funded. Yeah, just wanted to throw that in.
Thanks, Joey. Zoe, Joey.
So yesterday I threw some ideas, some thoughts out into the general slot there. And I agree just what you were saying, Steve. The tool makers are like the funded proposals. They get their head down and they're separate and distinct. They don't sometimes even communicate with one another, and getting them to lift their head up is very difficult unless they have a real need, like we did with AIM and the Harris earlier. So yesterday I put in this statement, just some thoughts that maybe we should group some of these together, like the ADA holders and stake pool operators. They have something in common. ADA, they need marketing to bring more ADA holders into the environment, and the stake pool operators need marketing in order to advertise what they're about. Why should I stake pool? You know, why should I put my money in your stake pool? So maybe those two could be two people, but put those two roles together. And the same with, you know, proposers, the PPA, the VPA. They have this whole process that they have to deal with, and as a result of that, all these issues come up. So they definitely need someone listening to them and trying to compile all that. Just what Natalie did exactly. Maybe the tool makers and the funded proposers could be grouped together because they're all creating, even the completed projects put in there, because they're all creating together, and have two people representing there. And I think eventually we're going to have to put some type of charity role in there, a philanthropic role, because we will be looking at some of that in the future. Those are just some thoughts.
Thanks, Joey. And I just wanted to put this out to the group is we seem to be doing a lot of different conversations and throwing ideas out, but we don't seem to be like funneling down to some kind of solution. Tommy mentioned earlier that we're running out of time. I just wanted to check that assumption. Are we tied to Fund 10 for the next circle, or is it decoupled and we're done when we're done? Or what's everyone's expectations around that? Is there time pressure to figure this out in the next little while? Or do we take our time and really have those conversations and figure it out?
Just to respond to that specifically, Nori, I just want to say, if we can sideload, votes about circle, about governance, and we just start that right now, I think we have all the time in the world.
Thanks, Steve. Joey, and then Reese, and then Felix. Oh, Reese, and then Felix.
I think that was a residual hand. Sorry, Joey. Yeah, for figuring out these roles, I don't think because this is like a bit of a sidetrack from what we were initially talking about. I don't think that is so urgent that we need to have that solved right now, because that's a whole other can of worms that we can discuss for the next 10 months quite happily and still not come to a decision. So I think that should be left up to the community to some respect, maybe with the next Pol.is or something like that, where we can discuss or we can get some feedback from the community. I think voting on a new circle is a bit of a hurry. I think we do need to get something in place. Because otherwise, what's the other option? That we'll carry on working here within this group for free and spending a lot of time doing it. I don't think that's really a good solution. I think we need to have new reps come in. They need to be funded. They need to be paid for the work they're doing. A fresh set of eyes on some of these problems, fresh opinions. It can only benefit, right? So that's my thoughts on it.
Thanks, Reese. Felix and Harris.
Very much second to what Reese mentioned. I think it's really important to keep the deadline, our Catalyst Circle version 4 election. If we would keep it and take it off, then, well, maybe it would just end in endless conversations. And even if we would take some weeks or months to figure out, we wouldn't find the answer anyhow. There's a process which needs to take place. For me, it's more, okay, how can we identify quite well what the problems we are facing and how do we transit them to the next Catalyst Circle, and then that they can move on to work on the problems. But I would definitely say CC Catalyst Circle version 4 election, parallel to Catalyst Fund 10, absolutely top priority.
Harris, and then Joey.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's way better for us to put something out there and experiment than it is to just continually deliberate. And getting the pieces in place to incentivize in the right way. We can bootstrap part of that process potentially. Just saying, these functions shall get 1% of treasury. That's allocated to Catalyst. Those kinds of things could be made. Ideally, that's made by the entity of Circle, whatever we define what that is. Again, I think money itself is going to become a challenge because, okay, if we're going to have 50 people in Circle and subcircles, are we going to give all of the Catalyst treasury to that organization? So there's got to be a balance, right? We need to kind of figure out that, because we need to balance the amount that is going towards furthering the ecosystem and the amount that's used as overhead to run the system. So we do need to kind of balance that in the right way. And at some point, we'll just need to make a call, ideally as a group, ratified by the community, ideally. And kind of going back to what was just discussed in terms of the functions, as folks were talking about it, Tommy's created some really amazing structure along with many, many other people to create these functional categories, which I think is a really good place to start. But, you know, talking about the function of PAs and VPAs that fits nicely under structure and processes. We talked about ADA holders and stake pool operators getting together, and that's perfect because it is the network and it is the ecosystem. That makes perfect sense. So I put this in the chat. Yeah, I'm just kind of reading that off. And then products and services, you know, it could be DApp makers, it could be tool makers and maintainers. And we have these other categories of people and culture and growth and impact. And so that might, you know, the growth and impact may be more of the oversight of, you know, what is the return on intention or return on investment of this Catalyst treasury that is used to further the ecosystem and these projects specifically. So just putting a line in the sand, like, you know, are we okay with these 5 different functions? And do we want to define those roles clearly and put that out for on a ballot somewhere to get people to be filled into these? And is it 1 position for each of these categories? Is it 2? Is it 10? You know, these are things, you know, that at least maybe we could put out as a straw man that we can make some decision, decide if we want to go this way or if we need to retune it a little bit. But it's also something we could test in a Pol.is as well. You know, is the community okay with this? Those kinds of things. So just some input. It seems like we have some convergence, but, you know, let's make decisions and experiment.
Is that a proposal, Harris, to adopt that structure?
It seemed to align with the discussion, and certainly is something we've been talking about for a couple months now.
Yeah. Okay. Joey and then Quasar, and then I want to circle back to the proposal.
Okay. What I'd like to do instead of jumping to my part, I just want to read my thoughts on, because it kind of fits into where we're at. And I wrote it down so I wouldn't mumble over everything. So I'm just going to read it if you guys will be patient with me. It'll only take a moment. If we look back using the lens of continuous improvement, we can see recommendations of Circle CCv3 pertaining to efforts of hours per week, the number of monthly commitments, the expectations of acceptable rewards, all can be improved upon. Recently, Kendrick put forth some ideas on rewards. Of the many points he made, I felt the most important was the personal involvement of the people that were going to be impacted by the decisions being made. Personally, I feel like we've been planning a wedding without a bride and groom, deciding who will be the caterer, what music will be, the band will play, almost down to the color of the bridesmaids' dresses. If today we can all come together and verify that the nomination criteria document, which may change because of what we were just discussing, and the candidate platform questions are good enough, then we can move forward with recruiting candidates and nominees and getting them involved up to their yin-yang in the decision-making process. If we can agree to do this, I feel like we have a much higher probability of getting a better outcome for CCv4. And these are my thoughts.
Thanks, Joey. Quasar. You're muted, by the way.
I thought I'd hit it. Thank you, Joey. I like you know, what you said there. Kendrick does bring a good point, something that's got to be addressed here. But when looking at the goals and the functions, I just have a question. There's one of the functions is raise strong objections to governance processes and Catalyst. Would anyone be willing to give me an example of that? Has it been done? What are suitable strong objections in the governance processes in Catalyst? And I'm going to tie that into the roles and groups, Tommy, in the chat that we were having. It does look like it's, you know, operational and bureaucratic, some of it, but there's a lot of action verbs in here to raise objections, to disseminate information, to communicate. So how that fits into what you're or what we're discussing, you know, I think it needs to be incorporated, because some of these things were set out to help us get to the point where we were managing or facilitating the management of the treasury and the innovation fund. when managing the treasury comes up, I just like to say that I'm not referring to having keys and signing anything, but more along the lines of suggesting how things could be allocated. So that's it.
All right. Thanks, Quasar. So just looping back to what Harris and Tommy have been talking about, it sounds like there is kind of a proposal that the next circle be broken into these 5 categories. And I just wanted to test the circles kind of where everybody sits with that, if that's a direction to move forward to kind of start to more converge on what we're doing here. And also just maybe to bring it up that we've continuously said that this is an evolving experiment. We don't have to get it right. We can change it again in the future, but we should make forward progress and try something new based on all the stuff that we've seen happen in previous circle versions and feedback from the community. So this seems to be one concrete proposal that's been put forward, that we have seats based on people and culture, structures and processes, network and ecosystem products and services, and growth and impact, which would make it kind of 5 primary seats or 5 primary categories, and the number of seats within each one is still to be discussed. It sounds like that could be open to more than one person, but yeah, opening up that for discussion because it seems to be a proposal that's put out. Joey.
Yeah, can we just do a quick around the room? I'm all for trying to make some decisions, and it's hard if we keep pushing it off to the next meeting. Can we just do a quick around the room on who feels like that's a good idea? I personally think it's great, and I think we should move that direction. And if we could do that, I think it would help move this forward.
Okay, let's do that. Quasar, how do you feel about that proposal?
Can I pass? I want to review those categories for a moment. I mean, I like it. I'm up for doing it, but I want to review them and honestly make sure that they match what the intent of Circle is, how they fit the roles, the goals, the functions.
Okay.
So I'll come back. Give me 5.
Okay. Felix, how do you feel about the proposal?
Yes, all up for the categories.
Yep. Okay. Steve? You're muted, by the way.
But you looked really wise.
What's say the question for me again?
There's a proposal that we structure the next circle around the proposed categories of people and culture, structure and processes, network and ecosystem, products and services, and growth and impact. So we're just doing a check around the circle. Yeah.
So you Tommy's list.
Tommy's list. Yeah.
Yeah. I miss the category. I really. I don't. We say people and culture and growth and impact, and what I want to see is community building and education specifically, right? And because that's hard, right? That's really, really hard, and I think they get lost in these kind of nebulous ideas of growth and impact and people and culture. I mean, that could fucking mean anything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's my only problem with the list.
Yeah, so if you look at the slides where these are coming from, there's more than enough details saying exactly that. So it is part of that. We can rename them if you want, but I can give you the better descriptions for those and then we can word them together.
Okay, thanks, Tommy. Wow. And barring the specific wording of these categories, because I think those can be changed or revisited or clarified even. Yeah, so if you agree in general, that's kind of, we're trying to take the temperature right now of that. So it sounds like everybody so far is pretty much not strongly opposed or strongly in agreement. Coming back to Quasar, how are you landing with all this?
Kind of like this circle, neither here nor there, if I may add a joke to it. So people and culture as a category, it's labeled that's IOG. Then growth and impact, that's labeled as CF. How?
Sorry, it's not labeled. It's just like putting what we currently have, these seats, that they kind of fit into some of those. I don't know which ones, but they do fit into some of those. But it's not limited to those.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would say that these are sort of the highest level, and that we need to next define the descriptions in enough detail that we're all content, because that determines what these roles would do. I think we need to determine the number of seats and how we incentivize them. We need to decide those things.
Okay. With that being said, then yeah, I'm landing in a warm spot on it.
Awesome. Reese, how are you with these?
I'm kind of indifferent about it, to be honest with you. I feel like we just kind of sidetracked from the actual conversation a little bit, and I feel like this wasn't really what we need to be discussing right now. I don't mind the groups particularly. I feel like we're just going in circles and creating arbitrary random groups to some extent. So yeah, I don't really have much of an opinion, to be honest. I don't think that's the issue that we need to be solving right now.
Sorry, Riz, if you look a few meetings back, you agreed to these like 2 months ago.
Well, like I say, I'm not disagreeing. I don't think that they're necessarily bad. I just don't think that this necessarily is like the right conversation to be having right now. I think we need to be focused more on how we're going to do voting and kind of move on to things that are a little more urgent.
Yeah, but we're still in the first thing, composition of the circle.
Yeah. Well, if this is what people want to do and we want to go in that direction, it makes no difference to me. The reality of it is it doesn't really make much of a difference, because any groups can be formed around these kinds of roles. So any representation from most or any person in the ecosystem could potentially fill any of these groups. So it doesn't really have as much impact.
That's exactly the point. Anyone is welcome to one of these.
And I agree that should be the case, right? I just I don't have an issue with any of these groups. Like I said, it's just feel like we're a little distracted. That's all.
Okay. Thanks for the feedback, Reese. And it sounds like you have no strong objections to it.
No, I don't know.
Zoe. Or would Tommy like to speak to the topic?
Sorry. Yeah, if I can just, I would just agree with what has been said about that. They are nice and that titles could be adjusted, but yeah, I highly agree with implementing that also, because I think it's very fundamental to what Reese said we should be discussing. I think it's super fundamental, and it's kind of low-hanging fruit decision. So yeah.
Just flagging, there's only 40 minutes left.
Okay, thanks, JP. Let's move. So it sounds like there's general consensus to move forward with this. And then, as Harris mentioned, next steps would be to actually more define in detail what the categories are and what the definitions of each of them are. But it sounds like there's general consensus that we can comfortably move forward with this type of structure as it's generally outlined. So the next steps would be, and I think Reese is correct that that definition doesn't need to happen right now in this meeting. And we can probably move forward to talking about the voting process itself and the timeline, since it seems like there is some urgency around that, if people are okay to move on with that. Anybody opposed to moving on?
If I may, I just want to quickly say that the last time I looked at one of the slides with Danny, I believe there was a link there to the old nomination criteria document, which showed all the different roles and what they expect. So if we're going to, I think the most important thing is to get a bride and groom. I mean, we don't even know if we can make a decision on voting the last week, but we need to know if there's even anyone going to run for the roles, and then get them involved to help make these decisions on, will you work for nothing? Will you work for 6 months or 3 months? I mean, we can say you can use any tool to vote you want, but if we got nobody running, it just doesn't happen.
Thanks, Joey. Tommy.
Yeah, that was a very good point. I think we've now said that we can have 5 brides and grooms, or 10 or 15 or whatever. So we have landed on some structure, and then we can describe what those are. And they don't necessarily need to follow the same logic, but for example, kind of requirements or at least preferences for this network and ecosystem role could be that you are a developer, or that you have experience in running a stake pool or something like that. Whereas that should not be a requirement for someone in people and culture, for example. So we can have those discussions after this meeting.
Okay. Does somebody want to drive the next steps for this to do the stronger?
I would love to.
Okay. So Tommy will take the next steps on this and gather people together and drive this. Maybe
Speaking of Drive, I cannot access any of the files on Drive.
Okay. So the next topic here, sorry that took so long, but I think it was an important conversation, is the voting process itself. Is that something we still want to make a decision around in this meeting?
Normally, we said last Thursday that we will make a decision today on this. And whoever, because Joey and not kind of agree, it's not easy for just set up a week before voting happens, everything, because whoever is running the election, they need to prepare. And they need more time to prepare than just a week. This was a little bit the conclusion from last Thursday, as I remember right, correct me if I'm wrong. But we had a presentation from DripDropz and a conversation with Chris. And the main idea was to decide if we want to go with the catalyst voting or with the DripDropz solution. But mainly to say, oh, okay, make the decision today already, and then we can keep up to date already the whoever will run the election, but they have time to prepare already. They definitely need the time, and we need the time then as well.
Thanks, Felix. Harris, and then Quasar.
So certainly, there is some intention of running a special voting event between Fund 9 and Fund 10. There are some other topics that are going to be potentially raised, and so I did want to open that we'll likely be having an event that could be run through the Catalyst process. It's a little bit different. It's more a specific scope of specific questions to get feedback from the community, and so it, certainly we could put the the actual vote for who's in those seats potentially within that time frame. I don't have an exact time frame, but I do know it's between 9 and 10. So that would allow us to put people in seats in Fund 10.
Okay, thanks, Harris. Quasar, you had your hand up.
I did. So I asked earlier for an example of raising a strong objection to governance processes in Catalyst. I actually do object to voting for a single person to be in a seat. This happened in CCv3, where groups of people nominated themselves, were nominated, and wanted to volunteer and work on this. And we went forward with that vote. So I believe the election or the voting process, perhaps it's for a seat or it's to fill multiple seats, but voting yes for one person to do something is voting no on the others who are passionate, volunteering, looking to get involved and engaged, and to turn them away by whether this is a mandate of it to vote on one person or not, it's not in line with decentralization, Cardano, Catalyst, the community, or anything. So I strongly object to the governance processes of Catalyst.
Thanks, Quasar. Are you, just to clarify, arguing against voting altogether?
No,
Or
no, not at
allowing,
all.
or just allowing groups to be represented and voted for?
I'm against voting for one person for one seat when there's multiple people willing, able, qualified to do this. So I'm against voting no on 4 other candidates when we need the help and the community deserves it. There's no way one person can represent the general, stakeholders. So I object to that.
Okay. Just before we move on to Joey and Harris, it sounds, to take another angle at that, like you're advocating strongly for subcircles. So anybody who's interested, barring running for a position, should be able to show up and add their energies to a subcircle, and perhaps that subcircle can send a representative to fulfill the reporting requirements of the circle from that subcircle.
Yes, you could say that, but if it's not explicitly defined, then I don't believe we're doing anyone any favors by creating bureaucratic loopholes or ways to do it. Let's be explicit and very implicit. No, let's just do what we mean. Let's say it out. Not subcircle. Hey, you can run. You got to have a speaker. You guys can work together. Let's be very clear with this and make it happen.
Joey, and then Harris.
Just a couple of quick questions. Harris, in that vote, will they be charging the voters ADA for that vote, like we do now for the vote? And the other thing on the topic of Quasar, the larger you make this circle, the harder it's going to be to make decisions. I mean, it's difficult now to get a decision. So I'm all for, hey, if you elect Quasar as to be the rep, and then the guy who comes in second and third, or the lady who comes in second or third wants to be in the subcircle, that's they could volunteer to do that. That's fine.
Joey, Harris, and then Steve.
So generally, it would follow the same process we have today, Joey. If there's minimal fees, but and minimums to potentially vote. So it would be essentially run in a similar fashion as we do today. It's just a different time frame. And I guess while I have the floor and my hand is up, I don't know. There was another question you had, Joey, that you wanted someone else to entertain.
No, it's just about the subcircle and the. Yeah, I'm not opposed to 2 people representing if SPOs and ADA holders are together, so that one can help the other. But if we have 20 people on the circle, we'll never get a decision made.
I definitely applaud the intent, Quasar, in terms of having it open. We don't want to restrict people, right? So we just need to make a decision. Like, we could ratify that, hey, we would like these areas. I don't know exactly what we should call each of these, but these functions represented by people, right? So we can put that out there, and we could potentially suggest that if there's incentive, right? Who does that incentive go to? It just goes to that function, and then each function decides. Because I think that's kind of where it comes down to, like, okay, who's incentivized? And if it's everyone's working for free, then that's easy. But if every single person that steps in and says, yes, I would like to participate in structure and process, and now there's an expectation that they also get incentivized, we would need a mechanism defined for how that works. So when it starts to come into funding distribution, that's where it becomes more complicated, I think. But we love everyone participating as much as possible. And those functions could potentially manage themselves. And that's where it becomes a bit more holacratic. In a holacratic scenario, there is sort of a couple of key roles that are filled and the rest are brought in by those key roles. And so that could be a potential direction to go. But, again, it comes down to the fundamental question, what are we voting for? Do we need to vote? Maybe we just need to ratify that these positions shall exist and you guys will self-organize.
That would be an easy way around the election question. Is let each category decide how they want to do it and maybe suggest various voting mechanisms if they want to use a vote, rather than having a standard across the board way of doing it. Steve, your hand is up.
Yeah. I really like the idea. I do. But I also know, I kind of feel like, this is 2 years old. And even though there's been some conflicts and everything, we generally ride along on this endorphin wave of everybody being happy to work together, right? And, so my problem with the idea of like a group of people sharing a role is not the idea. My problem is what happens when their infatuation with one another wears off. And I mean, maybe that won't happen with 3-month or 6-month terms, but it happens in every fucking relationship, right? Dissension ensues.
To the point of recruiting several people for one role, this would be nothing new actually for the Catalyst Circle, because this is exactly how the CC admin team was established. We sent out, hey, we need a facilitator and the secretary and treasury. We had several people who signed up, showed their interest, and then we brought them into a call. And out of this call, this wasn't planned, but what emerged is the best solution was to say, hey, take everyone who applied and trust enough the skills of the people who applied and let them figure out themselves how they want to structure and organize. And in this moment, this was the fucking best solution we could do, because out of this, we had the whole CC admin team emerging, which also is facilitating the whole part. And this is something what we should keep in mind. We need facilitators, which are able then, once people get onboarded, to bring them together, to help them a little bit to settle down, to establish their first work structures and to start to become effective. But there we have already some really great experience and some definitely earlier success to build on already in this regard.
It's Tommy and then Joey.
Sorry, you go first.
All right, Joey, do you want to go?
Yeah, just for Harris, I think last meeting that you attended, you mentioned something about possibly getting a budget for $1 million or so to fund me for category 4 to fund the circle. Is that still on the table, or?
I mean, it could be defined as a parameter, right? Ideally, that's a decision that's justified and ratified by the community, but it is something that could just become a parameter, just the way that challenge teams are paid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about the denomination, like how much, but again, that's the question: like how many people get paid?
Reese.
Yeah, that was something that was asked and commented on in that Pol.is survey, that it should be actually provided as part of, rather than requesting funding every round, it should be part of the parameters of Catalyst budget to be funding a group, the Catalyst Circle, to be able to do their work. So I think we should really be getting that, or trying to at least get that sorted as soon as possible. Obviously $1 million is definitely too much, but if we're going by Tommy's groups, then we have an opportunity to have multiple people representing those categories and working together under some kind of funding, some incentive to do the work and push forward and dedicate time and energy and resources towards this. And that definitely will help the Catalyst Circle as an entity in the future. So I think that's quite important to actually try and figure out as soon as possible. On the point of voting, the issue that people or that came up about using Catalyst, the Catalyst voting app for funding, which we spoke about last week, was that a lot of people are unable to vote. And I made the point last week that having it in the Catalyst app wouldn't be the worst thing, because it still gives us a way to massively increase participation over the 110 people or whoever voted us in for V3. So that's still a good thing. But if we can have, or if we use something like DripDropz, where we had the opportunity to have anyone, any ADA wallet, any staking address, or however we decide to go with it, to vote, then it can exponentially increase participation. And that, I think, is a better solution for the community. But right now, we just need to decide on which one we're going to use so that we can actually get it implemented, ready for voting. And I think a lot of that does ride on whether or not we can have the Catalyst, the next iteration of the Catalyst Circle funded. I think that's going to be really important for how we see this kind of play out in the future.
Just to bring it back to the goal of this topic is to decide on a voting mechanism. I'd like to suggest that people, after hearing the conversations and what we've been talking about, to actually make proposals that we can either say yes or no to, as a way of driving the conversation to some kind of resolution. So as you listen to this, if you have an actual proposal that, hey, like I think Reese maybe made a proposal that we should use DripDropz. If you want to make that a proposal, we can do that and go through. But yeah, I'll take comments from Joey and Felix. And then if anybody wants to propose something as a mechanism, be it Ideascale or one of these other ones, it would be great to bring that up and take a stand behind something. Joey?
Okay, I like the Ideascale proposal system because people are familiar with it. We know there's 50,000 wallets out there. We don't have to market it to a different community. And I'm not sure, maybe Harris can answer this, but just because there's a minimum, I mean, they can go and take a snapshot of anything, right? They don't have to measure that by how much is in your wallet. I mean, they might have to charge that first percentage for the on chain, but it shouldn't matter if you, I mean, money in the wallet, I think, has to do with them getting paid back or something, from what I understood yesterday. I could be wrong.
Felix?
You're talking about for Catalyst, or you're talking about for DripDropz?
I'm talking about for Catalyst. The $400 limit is just an arbitrary, or $500 minimum in your wallet is just an arbitrary number they came up with, right? I mean, can that be filtered out and anybody can vote?
Yeah, it's certainly the intent is that it's a security mechanism. That's the reason that there is that minimum. That way we don't have, you know, a bajillion bots, you know, submitting votes into a system. So that's part of the reason it disincentivizes, you know, folks from a voting security perspective. So that's the reason that it exists. Yeah, so I mean, just while I have the floor, you know, certainly, you know, it's whatever mechanism this team decides, you know, I think is fair, DripDropz or the Catalyst direction. You know, we want to just get the vote out there. Agreed, we need to make it available to as many people as possible. And certainly there will be some future aspects of the Lace wallet and other wallets that will allow for more general access and easier access to voting. So that is forthcoming. But you know, just from a time horizon perspective, we need to get this out, need to get it quick. having these kinds of simple questions that could be handled through something like DripDropz is certainly an option in my mind.
There's Felix, then Reese.
I would definitely advocate for a DripDropz solution at very first, because we are able to build up capacity and include community projects into Catalyst Circle and governance process, which is, I think, the most important part, to simply see, oh, okay, which people projects are out there already and building already quite effective solutions. How are we able to integrate them into the process? And also because it gives us the advantage it's on chain, can have full insight on it, where we don't really have this with the Catalyst voting yet. And the DripDropz team proposed it to run it for free, and they have the full capacity to execute. So a lot of things where I would say, hey, this is exactly what I would love to support as a Catalyst Circle. And with this, to start a process to say, oh, okay, what we are looking for is really long-term community engagement with Catalyst and governance, tooling and platforms, and how can we motivate on projects which come up there. In the best case, kicking off the first project, and whatever might come out of this can then be used to level up for Catalyst Circle version 5, 6, 7, 8, as we start to effectively and actively include builders into the governance process. And also stuff from IoT, so they have less to do.
Felix, Reese.
Yeah, I was actually going to raise the same points that Felix did. So don't worry. I think an on-chain vote would be good for the community. Actually being able to show that would definitely encourage participation. I think even just for the novelty of it, people want to get involved and they want to see that kind of stuff happen. And I think that's a very easy way to have it. I don't think there's anything wrong with using multiple voting mechanisms either, which we spoke about as well last week. But just actually coordinating that in a short space of time is almost overworking ourselves and kind of unnecessary, really, where we could just have, yeah, exactly, building some more legitimacy as well, having on-chain voting. Definitely, Felix, I completely agree with that.
Reese. Yeah, and JP didn't bring up in chat, could we consider doing multiple types of voting? And just looking at the categories, like some of the downsides of Catalyst voting would be negated by people that use Catalyst as their primary tool, like the VPAs and oversight DREPs, and maybe even the proposers and all them. So it would be possible maybe to run 2 different experiments and see which one works, and then they could inform each other, or that might be an interesting way to go.
Just for the record, you know, the Catalyst voting is done on a side chain. There is a bit of the process that sort of comes through IO right now, but it is using a side chain, and does offer privacy specifically. You know, for this type of vote, you know, perhaps privacy doesn't matter, but it is one of the considerations of the Catalyst voting system right now. And so I would propose either go one way or the other, and not necessarily both, to get us through this election. We can certainly experiment later. We definitely have a good understanding of how the Catalyst process works. So if the team decides to go with DripDropz, let's go that way. Or if we go with Catalyst, let's go this way. But for this particular election, you know, we do have other things where we're looking to vote on in a special election, or a special vote, I should say. And we don't want to overload that specific event with too much.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Eris. And you brought up a good point that I just want to explore with the DripDropz. You mentioned the privacy and anonymity of the Catalyst voting system. It's been mentioned from the community very strongly that that's a core democratic principle that we can't let go of. So any voting mechanism needs to be anonymous. It needs to be private. Nobody can know who voted for who or how that happens. So I want to just, for the record, does DripDropz provide that?
That's the thing. DripDropz, as it is on chain, everybody is able to look, okay, who casted which vote. it is definitely the advantage of the catalyst voting. And I'm agree, privacy is definitely really, really, really important. But this is something where I'd say, okay, none of the there isn't a perfect solution. When using the catalyst voting app, the problem is we don't have any insights on what is actually really happening and whatnot. On the DripDropz side, we can't guarantee privacy. And once again, the main goal, I think, is to say, okay, catalyst voting app is used already. There is experience made and on place. And for DripDropz in this regard, they also have, they made already voting on chain, but not in Catalyst with this regard. And the main opportunity would say, okay, let's take both and let's identify already best practices. What is working, how, and how can we improve for the next funding rounds? And as we mentioned already, we are not able to find the perfect solution for the next round, but we should do everything to have a process in place, which is able to improve and iterate over the time.
So real quick, Felix, and I'm sorry, Reese, but can I just send you my ADA handle, Felix, for the purpose of this vote?
Yeah, I was actually going to say that, right? The only real identifier beyond a staking address, which only leads you down a rabbit hole of looking at wallet address hashes and stuff like that. The only real privacy leak potentially is the ADA handles. And that's only because it's an identifier of an individual or a particular SPO or whoever, right? And that's the only real privacy issue.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how sorry. I can't tell you how sorry I am about that thing.
Yeah, well, it's also quite a handy tool at the same time, you know, that like there are compromises either way, right? And so does it matter who votes for who ultimately? Like, probably not. I think privacy comes into some things it's not really as much of an issue as other things, right? So I don't really think that in this context it should be an obstacle for us, really. You know, we're allowed to have an opinion, we're allowed to voice it. So what's the issue with potentially being identified for the sake of using community tools to actually push the community forward and the ecosystem forward? I don't know. For me, that's not so much of an issue. And I've literally got an ADA handle that's called Reese, if anyone wanted to know. So everyone would definitely be able to find out who I voted for, but it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter who I voted for specifically.
Yeah, and Quasar just mentioned in chat that Game Changer has burner wallets. If there's a way of doing some way of anonymizing yourself, I think that might be an acceptable thing. But I do think that privacy and anonymity is an important democratic principle that we just can't throw out because we don't think it's important. Some people think it's very important, and they've already voiced those opinions very strongly out there.
9 minutes left.
Okay, Joey, Harris, Quasar, we need to move on. I don't know if we're getting to any kind of a decision here, but
We are.
I just wanted to say quickly that when we did the election for Circle 3, I don't believe it was totally anonymous. So that wasn't, I didn't hear any objections or any big factors coming out of that, any blowback. So the anonymous thing, it's not a big deal for me.
Harris.
It also depends on what we're voting for. Are we voting for categories? Yes, you know, or is it like, we want Quasar for president? You know, like these are different connotations. And so, you know, I do think certainly one of our tenets is valuing privacy. You know, again, if we're electing people and, you know, there is a possibility of collusion and, you know, people bribing people to do things to get certain people elected for specific reasons, especially if we ratify some level of decision making by this group, then, you know, collusion could be real, and it's something we sort of expect is in the community and can happen.
Okay, thanks for Harris. We are running out of time. We're not going to get to all of the topics on the agenda. Do we want to continue with the voting process conversation until the end in the next 5 minutes, or do we want to move on? Does somebody want to make a proposal that we can actually throw out? Felix?
What do you think about just a quick vote? Who's for Catalyst voting app? Who's for
That's what I was going
DripDropz?
to say.
Then we have the solution and we can tell the teams are already, okay, good. Then we can set up with them as well, figuring out the other questions.
Can you form that as a proposal? Pick one of them and propose it as the solution, and then we can vote.
Oh my God, what do you want me to say?
A full proposal, a full one. Go to Ideascale and write it right
Oh my
now.
God, okay, oh my. Fortunately, we are here since a while. State a problem. Well, Google form voting sucks and Zoom also. Propose a required solution to your problem. Enabling, including DripDropz in the Catalyst Circle version for election. To firstly, mainly include the community in the whole process, outsource important workload and build capacity. And with this, starting a process in which the Catalyst Circle itself is able to define further improvements and developments for Catalyst Circle elections by including the community as active participant in governance processes. Here you go. This was amazing. I need to write this down as a proposal.
So to summarize, the proposal is to use DripDropz as the next voting mechanism for the Catalyst Circle, correct?
Yes.
Quick question. How much does it cost
Nothing. They do it for free.
to vote?
Yes. The voting happens, you need to send normally to ADAS in this regard for just to cover the minimum amount, and then it could work via any tokens, any snapshot of any tokens or whatnot you have on your wallet, and you receive back your ADAS. The only thing which stays is the minimum transaction fee to cast a vote.
Yeah, it basically costs a transaction, and that's it.
So 0.17 ADA or something like that.
Yeah, or maybe call it 0.34 just to cover 2 transactions for returning your funds as well, but it's less than half an ADA, definitely. I'm not sure if it's 2 transaction fees.
Great, let's vote.
All right, Joey, are you in favor or against that proposal?
I'm more in favor of Ideascale because of I think the population is more in tune with that, but I'm not opposed to using Ideascale. I mean, the DripDropz, I use it all the time. So I guess Ideascale for me.
Okay, Felix.
DripDropz.
DripDropz. Okay, Steve.
I'd prefer to use both, but just for the sake of experimentation, I'm willing to skinny dip with you all into DripDropz.
All right, Harris.
I'll abstain.
Abstain. Quasar.
No, that's not fair.
Is
Yeah,
this a
you
vote
can
for the only option? Like we're just saying DripDropz is it, or
At least as an option that
For
we
the-
move forward
I
with.
vote for it as an option 100%. Yeah, and the Catalyst voting app and Game Changer. I vote for all of them.
Okay, Reese.
I think I'm happy to vote for DripDropz. I think pushing towards community tools is beneficial, at least for a test.
Great. Tommy.
I missed last week's meeting and I watched the entire discussion afterwards, so I have some idea, but I now missed 12 minutes because I was putting my daughter to bed. So Zoe was here, so I will proxy Zoe to vote for me.
Okay, Zoe.
Yeah, I would also vote for several, which is voting app because of the privacy, or DripDropz because it sounds like a super cool opportunity to try the actual tech we're on, and or Game Changer wallet, which sounded awesome as well.
Okay, so no strong objections I'm hearing across the board.
Except against Ideascale.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So it sounds like we have general consensus that DripDropz is not, nobody's strongly against it. Does somebody want to move forward with that and own that as something to push forward, Felix? Okay. Awesome. We're down.
I'm happy to work with that as well, Felix. I'll help you out with that, mate.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been chatting with Lloyd as well with DripDropz. So I need everybody's email address and Discord ID, by the way.
We still need to decide what we're voting for.
Oh, come
that's
on.
not solving. You kill it all, Harris, man.
So we have two takeaways. One is to talk about the categories and the seats, and the other is the voting tool. So it sounds like we at least have two directions to develop further with the community now. We have 3 minutes left. Do we want to briefly talk about code of conduct, Pol.is, or changing the meeting time? Does anybody strongly want to make sure we cover one of those today?
I did just want to put it out there that we have a draft, and I don't know if everyone on the circle has contributed to it. So if you can look at the draft of the code of conduct, put in your 2 cents, then I guess we probably would need to decide what to do with it next. If we bring that back to legal or bring it to the community next, that would be the question.
Okay. So we have an action item for the whole circle to review the code of conduct, provide feedback, and then decide on next steps for that.
I just put that in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Harris. Tommy, then Reese.
Yeah, I reviewed like half of it, but it was too long to go till the end, but I'll try to do the second half later. I would actually suggest that we will not wait until next week, Thursday, to have a meeting about this follow-up discussion for the descriptions for the categories and seats and whatnot. Is everyone okay meeting tomorrow and then having a conversation with the swarm on Saturday regarding feedback to this model?
I can.
Yeah, definitely self-organize around that. We don't have to wait till the next meeting to continue these conversations.
Yeah, I can meet, but I am going to go to the Africa Town Hall tomorrow. So I forget what time that is. Felix, you know that time?
1800 UTC.
Yeah, so if you guys could self-organize that meeting after this, that would be awesome. We have 1 minute left. Reese, any final?
Yeah, just quickly, we don't need to talk too much about Pol.is, but if you guys can just go and find that link in the circle meeting and just have a look over it and add your comments or anything else, that'd be great.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Maybe we can take changing the meeting time to Slack and see if we want to do that and look at if we want to move the next meeting or not.
So I did send a doodle poll a while ago, and I didn't get all the responses. That's why it hasn't been moved forward. But I guess I will resend a new doodle poll with times, because once the dates pass, it expires. But if everyone could fill that out, it looks like there was a time on like Mondays from 7 to 9 p.m. People were keen. I think that's EST. So then it would be earlier, but I don't know if that would work for Europe. So.
Okay, thanks. That sounds like we have a good action item to track that. Let's do a quick checkout. Joy, how are you doing? How was the meeting?
I'm good. Meeting was fine. I'm happy. I just want us to keep moving forward, make some decisions so that we can get the clothes out of the washing machine and get them in the dryer.
Felix and then Steve.
I love your style of communication, showing your true master of it. But yeah, it was an amazing call, really productive, and thanks for everyone's time.
All right, Steve, then Harris.
I always enjoy the conversations, and I think that this was productive, but as always, I am leaving knowing that it's like trying to grab on to fog to describe it to anybody.
All right, Harris and then Quasar.
I think we had some good discussion today. I think we're getting closer to alignment, once we can kind of get things nailed down. let's experiment. And I'm glad that we're able to collaborate and create some good discussion. So I'm happy with the outcome of the meeting.
All right, Quasar and then Reese.
Also very happy. We are very close to making the decision that's been long overdue, and I am going to go fly a kite on the beach today.
Oh.
So you can tell me to go fly a kite, and it's not offensive.
Thanks.
Go fly kite, Quasar.
Reese and then Tommy.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there, guys, and that's really positive. So I'm really happy. You know, it's difficult conversations, but it's all coming to a conclusion. Everything's getting solved, which is really nice, and I'm very happy about everyone spending the time to discuss these things.
Thanks, Tommy and then Zoe.
Yeah, I like that Joey's washing clothes metaphor, because it feels like we've watched the same batch of clothes so many times, and now it's finally time to dry them up and put some clean clothes on. So yeah, I'm happy. I also want to thank Zoe for standing up for me here, because these meeting times are really bad for me, but I'm still suggesting to meet tomorrow at 5 p.m. UTC, if that's okay. And then if we can come up with some suggestion, it would be nice to get community feedback already on Saturday from Swarm.
Thanks, Tommy. Zoe and then JP.
Yeah, I'm super grateful that I could have been here. I enjoyed the conversation. I found it super productive. And yeah, thank you all for time, commitment, efforts, and brainpower. You're awesome.
Zoe, JP, final words.
Yep. Thanks all. Just keep an eye out on the Slack. I'll be sending the notes version and pulling out the action items like we did last time for easy access. So look for that immediately following this meeting. Thanks.
Thanks. And thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your time, your focus, and your energy. And for myself, I think maybe we need to iterate a little bit on the meeting process around proposals and how we get to decision making. That was kind of my big takeaway today, is we talk a lot, but we never actually focus down. So I may put some stuff into Slack around proposal kind of mechanisms so that we can do that more effectively and get to decisions faster as we move forward. But that's something to iterate on. I just dropped a form link into chat. We always appreciate your feedback after a meeting and any comments you have. So if you have some time, please do drop in some stuff in the form, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Nori.
Thank you for the support.
Thanks, Nori.
Thank
Really
you, everyone.
Great to see everyone. Ciao.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Have a
Great
good
to
one,
have
guys.
you back, Nori.